history at Tuskegee, Alabama. These 5 men were the first of their race to graduate under the Army Air Force's newly organized plan for training Negro pilots. From all parts of the country, these men have come to take the acid test. They are anxious and eager. No leniency is shown, and none is asked. After all, each cadet here has passed the same rigid entrance examinations, the same stiff mental and physical requirements as every other cadet. These are just 5 ordinary men learning to fly for their country. These men are representatives of 30 million fellow Negroes, and all 30 million have their eyes and hopes pinned on them. They flew hard, studied hard, and busted buttons, bulging their chests at inspection, and they made the grade. They are inspired by their leader, Captain Benjamin O. Davis, the first Negro ever to be accorded the traditional recognition by West Point upperclassmen. With basic completed, the new pilots are sent to Selfridge Field for advanced courses in strafing and skip bombing. Here, for the first time, they will fly P-40s, now redesigned and adapted to latest attack methods. Before their bombing flights over the target range, the pilots gather before headquarters for briefing. They have come from all parts of the United States and from all social levels to learn to fly, and if necessary, to die for their homeland. In their attentive eyes, confidence is reflected. Confidence in their ability to handle the task ahead, confidence arising from the knowledge that they have proven capable of handling our powerful warplanes. Negro pilots use some of the finest training bases in the United States. The Tuskegee Air Base at Tuskegee, Alabama, was built entirely by Negroes. In addition to this $4 million establishment, the Negro training program operates the well-equipped Oscoda Air Base in Michigan for advanced training. At Oscoda, pilots also step up from the BT-13 trainers to fast, powerful P-40 fighters. The percentage of washouts is no higher than in any other school. Their ability to grasp and utilize mechanical and technical knowledge is unquestioned. The morale is high, bolstered by the knowledge that they are not a part of an experiment. One of the group, Max Ross, ex-inspector in an Ohio steel mill, won recognition for a valiant effort to save his burning plane. Lieutenant Ross was the first Negro member of the famed Caterpillar Club. With small bombs fastened to the wings of their P-40s, the pilots dive in low over the ground, release the bombs, and speed away in a sweeping curve as the bombs skip into the target. Results are soon checked, and the deadly accuracy of these young pilots calls for a hearty congratulations all around. The men are prepared to meet the enemy. Then Italy. With Silver Wings 1, these men form the first Negro Pursuit Squadron and are sent into active combat under the command of the first Negro pilot to earn his wings, Lieutenant Colonel Ben Davis. Somewhere in Italy, the mechanics make final checks on their trim P-40s. Excitement is in the air. America's first Negro pilots are to receive their baptism of fire. They are to fly against the Luftwaffe and deliver a blow to the Axis. Bouncing down the improvised metal runway, they head straight for the enemy target, an old, well-fortified Italian city. And the target gets a pasting. For this and other excellent work, the Negro Fighter Squadron has won a group citation from the Commanding General of the Air Forces. Personal citations have been won by individual members. The Negro pilot has proved himself a capable, fearless fighter, dangerous and deadly to the enemy, an able defender of the American way of life.
Climbing to heaven like a skyrocket? Heaven's the wrong destination for that baby. That's a Zero, the real McCoy. It was shot down over Alaska. As luck would have it, the only thing that got really damaged was the pilot. He broke his neck. Swell, huh? Think you can recognize her again? This is the Japanese Zero. Take a good look at her. Your recognition of the Zero may save your life. Your recognition of the Zero may destroy its life. Watch her closely. Study every characteristic to aid you in your recognition. Look at that nose. A perfect circle broken only by the oil cooler. Note the slight dihedral angle. Look at that low wing and middle tail. Notice the oil cooler and air scoop directly below the engine cowling. See how the fuselage tapers to a point in the rear. It's like a big cigar. Note the tapering edges of the wings, the rounded tips. See how straight the line is from engine to tail. And that tail, see how the leading edge of the vertical piece tapers more than the trailing edge. Look how it curves out to a point away from the nose. Think you can recognize her? Don't think. Be sure. Watch her. Watch her closely. Yes, we know that's no Zero. That's a P-40. But did you know? They don't look alike to you now, do they? Look at the difference in the shape of those noses. The P-40, with its deep radiator, is oval. The Zero is a perfect circle, broken only by that oil cooler. Get those undercarriage fairings on the P-40. Compare the tails. The tail of the P-40 is high. The tail of the Zero is middle. Let's look at her from below. Look at the pointed nose of the P-40 and the blunt nose of the Zero. The leading edge of the wings of the P-40 has no taper. The wings of the Zero taper back. The tail of the P-40 is notched. The tail of the Zero tapers into the fuselage, which extends beyond it. Now, let's take them in profile. The engine of the P-40 is inline. The Zero is radial. Note the deep radiator on the P-40 as compared to the shallow oil cooler and air scoop on the Zero. Next, see how the cockpit canopy on the P-40 is much further back from the nose than on the Zero. What's more, the canopy on the P-40 fits into the fuselage, while the canopy on the Zero sits on the fuselage. Now for the tails. The P-40's is rounded and curves in toward the nose. The Zero's is pointed and curves out away from the nose. No one could possibly mistake them for each other, could they? You think not? Well, let's see. Let's take the case of one pilot. His name was Jimmy Saunders. His story starts on the day when he was flying to a base somewhere in the Far East.
Come in. Lieutenant Saunders reporting for duty, sir.
Glad to have you with us, Lieutenant.
Glad to be here, Major.
We can certainly use you. Sit down. Cigarette?
Oh, thank you, sir.
How was the flight over?
Well, I made it, sir, with the help of a P-40.
You like our P-40?
Oh, yes, sir. It's a nice airplane.
Good. Then maybe we can count on you not to shoot any of them down.
I didn't have any plans along that line, sir.
It's been done, you know.
You mean jet pilots?
I mean American pilots. Men with as much enthusiasm for the P-40 as you have, but with an unfortunate lack of ability to tell a friend from an enemy.
Excuse me, sir, but how could anybody mistake a P-40 for a Zero?
A great many things can happen in the excitement of preparing for combat. Too many pilots are too anxious to make sure of the kill. They start shooting before they've made certain what they're shooting at. It's a damn sight better to let a Zero get away than to knock down one of your own planes. Say nothing of one of your own men. We've few enough to spare around here.
Sir, I had no idea.
We're not broadcasting, in fact.
I know, but...
Now, don't misunderstand me, Lieutenant. It's not a common occurrence. Most of our men know their planes. Identification becomes second nature to them. If there's still a doubt in their minds, they maneuver close enough to make sure. Of course, there is such a thing as being too cautious. Take the case of the man who drew those silhouettes.
Say, that's quite a job.
He had plenty of time for it. Been flat on his back for 2 months. Shot down while he was still maneuvering around trying to decide if the other plane was a Zero or not. He found out. If he'd known his identification, that Zero might never have gotten him. Well, he learned his lesson, and to make certain that others would profit by it, he put it all down in those. All right, let's see if you can do your wafting on the Zero.
Yes, sir. With or without looking?
You might as well make it easy on yourself now. It'll be a lot tougher upstairs.
Yes, sir. Wings. Leading edge tapers, trailing edge tapers, tips rounded, slight dihedral angle.
You might add to that there are two 20-millimeter cannons mounted one in each wing, probably Swiss Oerlikon guns.
Yes, sir. Here's something I didn't know about, sir.
Huh? Oh, yes. The wingtips can be folded so as to utilize more space in a carrier. Incidentally, the span is 39 feet 4 inches. All right, go on with the engine.
Engine, radial, Mitsubishi version of our Cyclone.
That's right. There are twin-row 14 cylinders. Now for the fuselage.
Fuselage. Blunt nose with a spinner on it. Cockpit canopy sits on the fuselage. Retractable landing gear with fairing plates. Say, there seems to be one gear missing, sir.
The gears are operated hydraulically. As a result, the wheels retract alternately.
I guess there are a couple of things I don't know about this airplane, sir.
I'm glad to hear you admit it. That's the beginning of wisdom. The wings and the fuselage are in one piece, made of duraluminum. There's another feature worth noting. The entire fuselage is flush riveted. With the result, there are very few protuberances to cause wind resistance. The length is 28 feet 5 inches. There's a pair of machine guns mounted in grooves above the cowling. They're 7.7 millimeter, and they're synchronized to fire through the propeller. I hope you don't ever get them on your tail.
I'm with you there, sir.
All right, finish her up.
Tail. Leading edge of flat surface tapers more than trailing edge, with the fuselage extending to a point beyond it. Leading edge of vertical piece tapers more than trailing edge. Tail is pointed, curves out away from the nose. I guess that's it, sir.
Good enough. As you probably know, there are 3 types of Zeros. One is a single float plane without rigging. All 3 have slightly varying characteristics. But this is the type you're most apt to tangle with, so get to know her. All of her.
Yes, sir. I'll look for the balls of rouge on her wings and fuselage.
Yeah, I wouldn't depend on that if I were you. The Japs have a neat trick of painting her all sorts of colors. Sometimes even like our P-40s. Coffee?
No, thanks. Well, sir, how soon do I get a chance to knock one of them down?
Soon enough. But don't get any idea that the Zero's a pushover. With 340 miles an hour top speed, a service ceiling of 35,500 feet, and a normal range of 700 miles, increased by a droppable extra fuel tank, there's not much she can't do. They built her light maneuverable, threw away the armor protection for the pilot and the self-sealing gasoline tanks. She only weighs around 5,200 pounds, fully loaded, and has a horsepower of over 900. And when you see the speed with which she climbs, you'll appreciate what I'm saying. There's just no use trying to dogfight a Zero. That's out. Your best bet is to hit fast, either the wings or just behind the cockpit. But if you miss, don't hang around.
As bad as all that, sir?
Seeing's believing. But if I were you, I'd take my word for it.
Yes, sir.
Now, here's our operations. When you're on your own, you'll do patrol from our base here to these outlying islands.
Well, the big day finally came. Saunders was on his own, out Jap hunting. Looked sort of keyed up. Wouldn't you be? Don't expect too much, Lieutenant. Not on your first day. What's up? See something? It's a plane, all right. But what sort of a plane? Friend or enemy? P-40 or Zero? Well, now's the time to remember your recognition. Now, has it a deep radiator? Round tail curving in toward nose? Inline engine? Then it's a P-40. Or has that plane an oil cooler and air scoop? Pointed tail curving out away from nose? Radial engine? If it has, then it's a Zero. Tough to tell from here. Maybe if you got closer. Start climbing, Saunders.
Are you sure it was a P-40? I'm positive, sir. After he held fire, he drew up and dipped his wings in recognition. I don't like to complain, sir, but do we have to fight our own Air Force, too? You've got good cause for complaint. I don't know who's responsible for this, but when I do... Come in.
Major, I want to... I'm sorry, sir. Lieutenant Saunders reporting, sir. I just wanted
Lieutenant? Wellen here has been telling me that he was attacked this afternoon by one of our planes. Do you by any chance know anything about this?
Yes, sir. I'm afraid it was me.
He's afraid. Well, Saunders, what have you got to say for yourself?
Not much, sir. From a distance, I'm sure it was a zero. Then I held my fire.
A little late on your identification, weren't you?
Yes, sir. But I did run...
How far were you from the other plane when you opened fire?
I'm not quite sure, sir.
We'll soon find out. Have your film developed immediately.
Yes, sir. Major, I want
It can wait, Lieutenant. Get after that film.
Yes, sir.
Corporal, get the projector ready.
Yes, sir.
How could you start firing at that distance? Hold it. Didn't you look in your sight?
I thought I did, sir.
You don't seem to be very sure of yourself, Lieutenant.
I'm sure of one thing, Major.
Look at that airplane. It's closer now, I realize, but even at the distance you started firing, you should have been able to identify it. Look at that deep radiator, the inline engine. That cockpit canopy fits into the fuselage. The tail is round and curves in toward the nose. All right, Corporal, tell you what.
There's more film, sir.
I'm sorry, Lieutenant, but I have an appointment. You can stay and run it if you want to. Coming, Weldon.
If you don't mind, sir, I think I'll stay for a few more feet. I want to see how close I came to being wiped out.
Carry on, Corporal.
Now I know what a clay pigeon feels like. Hey, wait a minute. That's not me. It's a zero.
What? Hold it. Well, Saunders, I think I'll forego that appointment. Let's hear about this.
Well, sir, following my encounter with the lieutenant here, I was flying along, wondering if I should slit my throat. I felt like a candidate for the Jap Air Force, getting time to turn for home. Not that I was homesick. I had a hunch what was in store for me, but well, there was no use stalling. I was thinking, that other guy's probably back already, telling the major how he almost got knocked down by another P-40. I was thinking what you'd tell me when I got back. Suddenly, I stopped thinking. I saw something. Another plane. I tried to make her out. She was too far away. I started to climb. I had to get my recognition right this time.
Cigar-shaped fuselage tapering to point and rear.
Check.
Wings close to nose. Canopy sits on fuselage.
Check.
Tail pointed. Curving out. Blunt nose. Stubby spinner.
Radial engine. Oil cooler. Air scoop at bottom of nose. It's a zero. Check. Explosion and... Well, I guess that's all, sir.
Well, that's enough.
Holy smoke.
What's the matter with you, Weldon?
Well, it just occurred to me, sir. There, but by the grace of God, went on.
I see your point. I don't think, however, that you'll have anything to worry about in the future. At least not from Saunders. He seems to have learned his lesson. By a method I'd hardly recommend putting into general practice, but nevertheless he's learned it thoroughly. If every pilot would only realize the importance of identification and become letter perfect in the art of identification, there'd be fewer lives lost and fewer planes destroyed. Know your enemy, but also know your friend.
Well, they know their friends, all right. And what's more, they know their enemy. Do you? Radial engine. Perfect circle, broken only by oil cooler. Low wing. Cockpit canopy sits on cigar-shaped fuselage. Blunt nose. Stubby spinner. Oil cooler and air scoop. Fuselage tapering to point in rear. Closeness of wings to nose. Radial engine. Canopy close to nose. Tail pointed and curving out away from nose. Remember, on your recognition of the Zero may depend your life. Know it so you can destroy it. This is the Japanese Zero.
This is free China, where the fight against the Japs continues. These rice paddies have been irrigated this way for centuries. Water buffalo are almost as old as the land itself, where the eternal fight for food is as bitter and hard as the struggle against the invading enemy. Malaria, dysentery, and cholera plague the people. Into this primitive country, Americans came to fight with the most modern of weapons, air power. This is where General Chennault and the Flying Tigers of the 14th Air Force have forged one of the most amazing links in the chain of American air power that now stretches around the world and is strangling the Japanese Empire. The 14th fights a long way from America. To understand its achievements, you must consider its peculiar problems. Everything you see here, every piece of machinery, every American soldier, every drop of gasoline, and every bullet and bomb has been flown into China. Everything the 14th uses, from paper clips to blockbusters, comes from America over a supply line that's unbelievably difficult and complicated. To make it simple, we'll start from the docks of Calcutta and ignore the 10,000-mile convoy trip it takes to get there. Calcutta is the second city of the British Empire, whose docks should easily accommodate our shipping. From Calcutta, supplies travel 600 miles north bases in Assam. Here are acres of jeeps stored in a Calcutta park, all destined for China. Destined. Warehouse facilities are jammed and the overflow lies in the open, exposed to burning sun in the dry season, drenched in torrentials during the monsoon. All these vehicles and equipment await shipment north. But there's no single road to Assam. You use ox cart, truck, river barge, railroad, and air transport, and in no set system. What moves by rail today may be reduced to river barge tomorrow. These barges on the Brahmaputra River take 40 days for a single journey. The Assam-Calcutta Railroad was not built for heavy traffic. In peacetime, it hauled the tea crop to the docks and carried planters' supplies back to Assam. Now it carries heavy supplies for British, Chinese, and American armies in Burma, in addition to materiel for the 14th in China. China waits for this equipment, but the equipment waits for freight cars, and waits, and waits. Ammunition rusts, rubber hose rots while the 14th Air Force patches and waits. Broad gauge track begins to disappear 180 miles north of Calcutta. The time-consuming transfer to narrow gauge trains begins. Not even a box of K-ration can be shipped from Calcutta to Assam in the same car. This electric crane can transfer heavy equipment. Unfortunately, it's the only one on the line, and a bottleneck. 5 hours is the average time for 24 drums of gas to move from broad gauge to narrow gauge boxcars. Even tank cars have different capacities, and their contents have to be transferred. Here is the last inch of broad gauge track. Trucks are transferred here by laying planks between the cars and driving the trucks across from broad gauge to narrow gauge. That at least is simple, when there are no accidents or derailments. These ferries across the Brahmaputra are the last bottleneck along the line to Assam. One carries personnel and the other rolling stock. Cars are pushed aboard, and in less than an hour are on the far bank. They unload again and are off to Chabua, 300 miles away. 26 hours by the fastest passenger train and days by freight, if all goes well. At Chabua, things begin to pick up. The airport and its satellite fields is the great hub of activity in Upper Assam. Here, freight is unloaded, inspected, classified, and stored. But all China has to fight on these supplies. Only a fraction goes to the Flying Tigers. Here is the precious fluid for the 14th fighters and bombers. Here are the 300, 500, and 1,000-pounders that the Flying Tigers will deliver to the Japs. Everything that can be crammed inside the fuselage of a transport is flown across the hump to China. Even a primary trainer. The hump. 500 miles of the worst flying country in the world. Everything's been easy up to now. As you climb up off the field at Chabua, you can see the dead end of India sealed off by the 16,000-foot ridges of the Himalayas. You have to top these peaks to get to China. To the north are snow-covered Tibetan peaks, rising up to 25,000 feet. To the south are the Japs. Below, barren, frozen wastes and jungle-filled valleys inhabited by headhunters. There's no summer on the hump. Snow always crowns the peaks. Ice hangs heavy in the clouds. Black monsoon storms sweep up from India, screening the peaks and bringing terrific turbulence that has flipped fully loaded transports on their backs. The worst up and down drafts in the world slide around these slopes. Jap fighters from Burma prowl the hump, looking for easy game. There is heavy toll on freight for the 14th. Casualties among transport groups flying the hump are higher than many bomb groups sustained in combat. Many a cargo destined for China is rusting on these peaks. It's a tough job delivering the goods to China. 4 hours of sweating it out each way. Looking for Japs if it's clear, and taking your chances with the weather if it's not. Then finally, you break out over Lake Kunming, nestling in a broad valley 6,000 feet above sea level. Down into the gateway to free China, the home of the 14th, and the back door to Tokyo. This is the end of the line for the hump pilot. He goes back to India for another load, and the 14th takes over. Kunming was the first base of the 14th. One of the first jobs of its pilots was to defend their airfields and keep the hump route open. Here are some of the men who did that job. They are the $500 bonus for every Jap plane destroyed. In the 5 months after Pearl Harbor, they got 300 Jap planes and lost only 12 of their own pilots. From these original Flying Tigers, the newly organized 14th Air Force got planes, pilots, insignia, a commander, and a great tradition. The planes were battered P-40s with 30 caliber machine guns, museum pieces on any other front, but all they could get in China. But the pilots were battle-wise veterans who now joined the Air Force as majors. commander was the retired Army captain who led the Flying Tigers, now Brigadier General Claire Chennault. With this motley array of men and planes, he faced a ring of Japanese air bases from Upper Burma to Indochina and prepared to keep the aerial supply line over the hump open. Small wonder the Japs thought they could blast these Americans out of China. The stakes were high when they tried. If they knocked out the Air Force, they could close the hump. Without the hump, China would be cut off from the Allies and virtually out of the war. Again and again, the Japs sent big formations of fighters and bombers against the American air bases around Kunming. Day after day, the red air raid warning balls went up, and the pilots scrambled for their shark-nosed fighters. Bombers bored in. Shark's teeth flashed to attack with General Chennault's famous fighter tactics. enemy losses were so heavy that the Japs were forced to give up their attacks. With the hump bases safe, General Chennault planned to move into East China and take the offensive. With the help of the Chinese, the 14th was free to kick open the back door to Tokyo a little wider. The first jump was 400 miles east from Kunming to the Hengyang-Luzhou line, with major fields at Hengyang, Lingling, Guilin, and Luzhou. 250 miles closer to the Japs were the staging fields of Sichuan, Kanzhou, Namyang, and Nanning. From these new positions, American planes could attack the Japs along a wide arc from Shanghai to Saigon and as far east as the Philippines. Nowhere else in the world in the spring of 1943 could American air power strike so close to the heart of the Japanese Empire. You are seeing a miracle. In less than 3 months, people built a chain of airfields that could handle the biggest American bombers. They built them on the land that formerly raised their food. They built them by hand. Their pay was 20 cents and a bowl of rice a day, and the Japs the American planes would kill. As many as 90,000 people worked on a single field. From H.A. warning net kept American planes from being caught on the ground. Chinese spotters, farmer territory between our bases and the Japs. They flashed word of enemy air movements by telephone and radio. If a Jap bomber warmed up on a Canton airfield, word often reached this fighter control cave at Guilin before the plane could take off. The net also guided lost planes, and Chinese guerrillas saved many American pilots and crews who had to bail out by the Jap lines. No American stood guard, cooked, or carried. They built our quarters and did our housekeeping. Many Chinese with technical training joined the ground crews and helped keep American planes and equipment working. New American planes reinforced the battered P-40s and the B-25s that were the bomber command. Long-range B-24s, cannon-carrying B-25s, and some P-51s. Crews of the Chinese-American wing. These Chinese airmen had been trained in America and now returned to their own country, ready for revenge. But the 14th was still the smallest American Air Force and lived on a starvation diet of supplies. It took almost all the increasing hump tonnage to keep the new planes supplied with gas, bombs, and bullets. B-24s supplied themselves, flying 4 supply missions across the hump for every combat mission they flew against the Japs. This plane would be junked in any other theater. In China, it is patched with parts from other wrecks and sent back to fight again. Firefighting equipment that would have saved the life of this pilot. But it would have displaced a 1,000-pound bomb or 200 gallons of gas in the precious hump tonnage. choices the 14th has to make. This is the hard way to refuel. Modern gas trucks and pumps couldn't squeeze through the hump bottleneck. Gas for motor fuel is diluted with 75% alcohol, made in China. It's hard on the motors, but it saved tonnage. All this gas meant scores of dangerous hump trips and took weeks to accumulate. All of it was burned up in a single mission of one heavy bomb group. This was also burned in a single mission, a Jap mission. 15,000 gallons of gas and oil went up in this blaze when Jap night raiders hit a supply train at Luzhou. Probably the best way to explain the shoestring on which the 14th operates is to realize that everything delivered to it over the hump the first 6 months of 1944 could have been carried in 5 Liberty ships. New supply problems were created by the move to East China. High-priority cargo still moved by air. But the bulk of supplies moving to eastern bases traveled in another patchwork system of trucks, a rheumatic railroad, and these streamlined carriers. Christmas came late to East China. It was March when these Christmas packages from America and Santa Claus reached Guilin. The Flying Tigers had to do the most with the least. One bomb in China had to do the work of a dozen elsewhere. To do that, you go down low and ram it home. Like that. That was practice. By the fall of 1943, the 14th was punching the Japs from Indochina to Formosa. Shipping was the main target. The new bases brought the Japanese lifeline within easy range. This lifeline was the sea route from Japan through the Formosa Straits, down the South China Sea, to the Dutch East Indies, and the Southwest Pacific. Oil, rubber, tin, and other raw materials moved north to Japan. Troops and supplies moved south to the Pacific fighting fronts. As the Navy moved westward across the Pacific, more and more Jap shipping was squeezed into the China Sea. The 14th's hunting grew better. Every type of plane the 14th had joined the attack on Jap shipping. Dive bombed, skip bombed, and strafed. B-25s came in at mast height with cannon fire and bombs. B-24s bombed the ports from high level, smashing docks, shipyards, and warehouses. Hong Kong was one of the targets. As a result of these attacks, the Japs realized that they had to drive the 14th China. 3 times they tried to knock the Americans out of their eastern bases. Here's where the first attack started. In the spring of 1943, the Japs drove south from the upper Yangtze. In the summer, they tried an air blitz. In the fall, they were back with an on Tungting Lake. Each time, the combination of Chinese troops and American planes hurled them back with heavy losses. In the spring of 1944 came the Great East China Offensive. 200,000 Japs poured down from the Hankow Bulge. Another 50,000 pushed north from Canton to squeeze East China in a gigantic pincer. Their objective was to drive the 14th out of China, gain control of the Hankow-Canton Railroad, and fortify the China coast against the threat of landings by the American forces pushing westward across the Pacific. The 14th attacked with every weapon in its arsenal. Despite bad weather, fighters strafed troop columns with rockets, frag bombs, and machine guns. Many cavalry columns spearheading the drive were broken up by strafing and bombing. All this cost American blood, as well as gas, bombs, and sweat. Pilots flew 3 and 4 missions a day for weeks without end. These Jap prisoners taken at Hengyang were thin and half-starved. They said no rice and little ammunition had reached them for weeks because of air attacks. American bombers and transports dropped supplies to the Chinese garrison by parachute. Then the 14th ran out of gas. Some fields had no gas. Some had just enough for one more mission. At others, gas was pumped from bomber tanks to keep the fighters in the air. Before enough gas reached the advanced fields, the Japs had surged over Hengyang, never again to be halted until they had split free China. The great retreat was on. One by one, the airfields the Chinese had clawed out of their precious rice paddies with their hands were mined and made ready for destruction. The 14th fought a desperate delaying action. To the last, American pilots flew 4 and 5 missions a day, living in hostels stocked with gasoline, never knowing when the order to apply the torch would come. Generals Chenault, Stilwell, and Vincent conferred at Guilin. He issued orders to blow up the fields. All but a few combat crews were evacuated by air. Attempts were made to salvage all possible equipment and supplies, but much of the precious hump-hauled freight had to be burned to keep it from the Japs. Hostels and warehouses were burned to the ground. That night, the hangars, the barracks, the equipment flown in over the highest mountains in the world burned like a funeral pyre. In the early morning, there was nothing left of a great American air base but scorched earth and the bitter taste of smoke in the air. The city near the river, set fire to their own shops and homes. What they could not carry on their backs, they burned. This was what they left to the Japs. Broken walls, streets full of ashes. When the town was completely destroyed, they blew up the bridge behind them. There were many cities like this in China. Some were burned by the Japs, some by the Chinese as they slowly retreated. After 7 years of war, this was the face of China. On the last day, runways were blasted by 500,000-pound bombs. One by one, the bases were destroyed. Hengyang, Lingling, Guilin, and finally Luzhou. The headquarters safe was removed. And the flag came down at Luzhou on the afternoon of November 7th. Combat crews packed their luggage in B-25 bomb bays. Carrying 10 to 15 men, the Mitchells took off from Luzhou for the last time. A few hours after these pictures were taken, the runways were destroyed. The Japs were only 20 miles away. In the wake of the Jap advance, a tide of homeless Chinese flowed along the long and bitter road to Kunming. Chaos and suffering defied description. When these pictures were taken, 80 trains waited to be routed westward from Luzhou over a single track. 100 waiting to be shipped, with thousands of gallons of gasoline salvaged from the abandoned airfields. The few remaining guns of the Chinese army, American ammunition, tools from a machine shop, even railroad ties, all took precedence over the people. A captured Jap Zero was shipped back for intelligence examination. Meanwhile, the refugees clung to hope and waited. Some, considered lucky, fled by trucks, stinking charcoal burners, alcohol burners that had to be warmed and pushed to start. A truck carrying American belly tanks mingled with the mob. The road was lined with broken down trucks. Many were stripped of parts to keep others going. The only way to stop runaway trucks without brakes was to run them off the road, where many of them stayed along with the equipment they carried. Most of the homeless horde inched their way on foot, with all their belongings in the bags dangling from poles. Beaten and weary Chinese soldiers mingled with the civilians, many of them without either rifles or shoes. They carried sick and wounded on bamboo stretchers. Farmers and soldiers combined to carry much of the rice harvest beyond the reach of the enemy. Jap 5th columnists helped spread panic. All over eastern China, these scenes were repeated throughout the blistering summer and wet, muddy fall. Here was a people again uprooted, repeating the scenes of 7 long and horrible years of war. These refugees had long been a favorite target for Japanese pilots. But during this long trek, Jap airmen declined to venture into American-held sky by day. No Chinese were killed by strafing or day bombing. General Chennault ordered special fighter patrols over railroad yards and other congested areas when Jap air attack seemed imminent. None came. Prices along the road to Kunming, refugees streamed past new airfields that thousands of other Chinese were building to give General Chennault's flyers new springboards for attack. In Burma, crack Chinese divisions were loaded into transports and flown to the crumbling East China front. They had American artillery, bazookas, mortars, machine guns, and plenty of ammunition, and had proved they knew how to use them in driving the Japs out of North Burma. Colonel Luke Williamson's flying coolies rushed other fresh troops from Chungking to the threatened area. The Japs were within 20 miles of cutting the Burma Road in China and overrunning the new American fields when these veteran Chinese troops, supported by air attack, hurled them back 60 miles off the Guizhou Plateau down into the valleys of East China. The Japs had started out in May to take the Canton-Hankow Railroad, occupy strategic coastal areas, and knock the 14th out of China. When they were checked in January, they had the railroad and the strategic areas, but they had failed to knock the 14th out of China. Even while they were fighting to clear China of the 14th, the Far Eastern Air Force and the Navy bombed the China coast from the Pacific. Their attacks were echoed by bombs from China-based planes hitting the same targets. The Japanese lifeline was caught in a vice of American air power, stretching around the world. More supplies reached the 14th as the first convoys traveled the Lido Road, opening the first land supply route to China in 3 years. From new bases all over China, the Flying Tigers renewed their offensive. And the Japs well knew what the relatively few planes of the 14th on their China flank could do. This is what they have already done. Destroyed 2,000 small supply boats and hundreds of locomotives, trains, vital bridges, supply dumps, and barracks. Destroyed 2,500 Japanese planes. Killed 35,000 Jap troops. Sunk and damaged 1.75 million tons of Jap merchant shipping. That was the work of the Flying Tiger.
Lieutenant Barton reporting, sir.
Oh, yes, Barton. Glad to see you. I understand you're here to fly away a Curtiss P-40.
That's right, Mr. Collins. Is this the one?
That's it. It's all yours. And it's a fine airplane. I've just been giving it a workout. I suppose you're anxious to go over the instruments and controls and really get acquainted with the P-40, huh?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute.
Huh?
Aren't we going to use this one? My Curtiss P-40?
No, we'll use that plane over there on the jacks.
I never got anywhere on a pair of jacks.
Well, we open on jacks, Barton. The aces turn up later in the final showdown. You see, Lieutenant, with the plane on jacks, you can operate the landing gear and get used to the controls before taking the ship off the ground.
I might as well hook up my parachute and safety belt, I guess, so I'll feel at home.
That's right. It'll help you get familiar with the cockpit. We recommend the use of these shoulder straps. They'll keep you from being thrown against the instrument panel in case of a mishap. We've found that the best way to learn the P-40 is to study one system at a time. So let's start in with the fuel system. Here's the fuel selector valve down here at your left.
Yes, sir. I see it's labeled with the capacity for each tank.
Yeah, and when you set it in position, you'll feel a positive click.
Well, Mr. Collins, is there any certain order for drawing fuel from the different tanks?
Yes, there is. For taxi and takeoff, we recommend the fuselage tank because it's higher and the fuel flows with more of a gravity head. Also, as the fuel is used up, the airplane's center of gravity moves forward. This causes the plane to become more stable and makes it a better gun platform. This gauge on the instrument panel shows the amount of fuel in the fuselage tank. Now, of course, if you're flying a plane with the belly tank attached, you should start using that tank as soon as you've climbed a bit. Then, if you get in a fight, you won't waste any fuel. When you pull this release and drop the belly tank from the plane. When the fuselage tank and the belly tank are empty, switch to the rear wing tank. The gauge is on the left side of the cockpit floor.
I see. Then you save the front wing tank until last.
That's right.
Uh-huh. Is there any sort of a signal when your fuel runs low?
Yes. Normal fuel pressure is between 15 and 16 pounds. And when any tank begins to run dry, well, of course, your fuel pressure drops. And a warning light flashes on in time for you to turn to another tank. On the lower left side of the instrument panel is the switch for the electric fuel pump. It's a good idea to keep the fuel pump on all during flight, so you won't forget to turn it on when you need it at high altitude. The cooling system of the P-40 is regulated by the cowl flaps, and these flaps should be open whenever you taxi, take off, or climb. In most P-40s, the flaps are controlled by a manually operated lever on the right side of the cockpit. But in some of the P-40Fs, the cowl flaps are controlled by an electric switch. You put the switch up for automatic operation.
If the automatic feature fails, can I still operate the flaps?
Yes, you can put the toggle switch down and hold it to the left to open the flaps, or down and to the right to close them.
Well, Mr. Collins, of course I know the cowl flaps regulate the temperature of the oil and coolant, but what temperature should I try to maintain?
Normal oil temperature is between 40 and 90 degrees centigrade. Coolant temperature is between 85 and 125 degrees centigrade. Now, if the coolant reaches 125, a light warns you to open the cowl flaps and cool the engine down. Of course, you never take off with the coolant temperature above 125 degrees. The landing gear and wing flaps of the P-40 are raised and lowered by means of hydraulic pressure. This is the flap control right here. To lower the flaps, you push the control handle forward and pull the lower trigger on the control stick. Don't get mixed up and pull the gun trigger by mistake. The flaps should never be lowered when your airspeed is above 140 miles an hour. At higher speeds, you might damage them by trying to put them down. The plane also becomes too nose-heavy.
Are the flaps automatically locked in position?
Not until you move the control back to neutral, like this.
I see. And I suppose the flaps up position is back here.
Yes, Martin, that's right. To raise the flaps, you move the control back and pull the trigger on the stick. The flaps go up pretty fast, so don't try to raise them at slow air speeds when your altitude's below 500 feet. At air speeds less than 110 miles an hour, the plane will mush down if you raise the flaps. So if you overshoot the field, gun the engine and climb back up to 500 feet before you put the flaps up. The landing gear control lever is here on your left. To raise the gear, push this pin forward and lift the handle. But don't do it while the plane's resting on its wheels.
That would be kind of silly, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but one of my fellows did it the other day.
Was he hurt?
No, he got away before I could catch him. But you're all right as long as the plane's on jacks. So go ahead and raise the gear.
How soon after the takeoff should the gear be retracted?
Just as soon as you clear the field. Watch the indicator, and when it shows that the gear is up, check the position by operating the hand pump.
It must be stuck. I can hardly move it.
When the pump is solid, the landing gear is locked in retracted position. Now put the control back in neutral, and that locks the hydraulic fluid in the retracting system. Before you lower the gear, be sure to reduce your airspeed below 175 miles per hour. The hydraulic mechanism is not designed to force the gear down against a higher airspeed. Then push the control handle down. That's it. Now pull the trigger on the stick. That starts the gear down. Before the gear gets all the way down, retard the throttle.
All the way back?
Yep. So the warning horn will blow until the gear is down and locked. Then, when the horn stops, the gear is safely down, as shown on the indicator. That's right, Barton. It's always a good idea to check the hand pump. Then lock the system by putting the lever back to neutral. All P-40s up to the L model have an emergency hydraulic system. Now, to operate the emergency system, unlock the catch at the bottom of the hydraulic hand pump handle. Put the handle on the emergency pump. And open these two red emergency valves. Don't open them now because the main system's on. But if the main system is shot away, you can get the wheels down by operating the emergency pump. Now, you'll have to land without the tail wheel or the flaps because the emergency system operates only the main wheels. The brakes are on a separate system, so they'll be okay. Now, maybe I'd better explain the throttle quadrant. Tighten this knob just enough to keep the controls from creeping.
Are the P-40 controls different from any others?
Yes, the operation's a little different. Take the mixture control, for instance. Now, you'll notice that there are several settings. Full rich is for emergency use, if the automatic mixture control should fail. You'll probably never have to use it. Auto rich is for all high-power operations, takeoff, climb, and combat. Manual is for long-distance economical cruising. Auto lean is an automatic setting for economical operation at lower power, below 2,300 RPM, and 30 inches of manifold pressure. And idle cutoff, of course, is for use when stopping and starting the engine.
The mixture control is clear enough, but what are these two controls?
Well, they operate the automatic boost control and the two-speed supercharger on the Packard-built Rolls-Royce engine. The boost control automatically provides takeoff power with the throttle full open and the boost control handle up in this position. And at retarded throttle position, the boost keeps the manifold pressure constant.
When do you turn the boost control off?
The only reason for turning the boost control off, like this, would be if the automatic feature should fail. With the boost control off, don't open the throttle too wide or you'll get too much manifold pressure.
Yes, I know better than to take too much manifold pressure with a low RPM. That would make the engine knock.
That's right, Barton. And engines have been known to blow up when allowed to detonate or knock for only a few seconds. You should always raise the RPM first, then bring up the manifold pressure. And to cut the power down, reverse the procedure.
Okay. I think I understand the operation of the boost control, but what about the two-speed supercharger? When do you switch to the high position?
Move it to high when you reach an altitude of 13,000 feet. But first, you retard the throttle slightly. Otherwise, the high supercharger might build up too much manifold pressure. Now, move the supercharger control up fast. That's right. And then open the throttle again to get the desired climbing manifold pressure. All P-40s are equipped with Curtiss electric propellers, and you should know how they work. These two switches on the instrument panel operate the propeller. The left switch is a circuit breaker and should always be on. The right switch controls the pitch of the blade. Now, when it's in automatic, you can use the propeller governor lever to select any RPM you want. With the switch in manual, the blades are fully locked, like a fixed-pitch propeller.
Can you change the pitch of the blades?
Sure you can. To increase the RPM, hold the switch down and to the right. To decrease the RPM, hold the switch down and to the left.
What pitch do you use for takeoff?
Always take off in the automatic position with the governor control lever full forward for 3,000 RPM, or emergency military power. The governor will hold the RPM constant at 3,000. Open the throttle to full takeoff power, to the stop with an Allison engine, and past the stop in the case of the Rolls-Royce engine, when the automatic boost control is on. Then, after takeoff, you reduce the power.
About this much?
Yeah. Retard the throttle to approximately 35 inches of manifold pressure. And pull the propeller governor control back to the desired RPM position.
Was the switch still in automatic?
Yes, you leave it in automatic for normal flight, but for long cruising, put it on manual. And lean out the mixture just as you would with a fixed-pitch propeller. Green marks on the tachometer and manifold pressure gauge show the maximum power condition which can be held for continuous operation. Have the mixture at auto-rich for the normal power condition. For long-range cruising, reduce the power below 2,280 RPM and 30 inches of manifold pressure. Auto lean mixture setting may be used at this low power. Well, how about it now, Barton? Are you all set on the propeller?
Yes, I think so. What's next?
Well, suppose we go through the operations of starting the engine. Now, you make the settings as I call them off.
Right.
Mixture at idle cutoff. Throttle 1 inch open. Fuel on fuselage tank. Carburetor air full cold. This prevents possible backfiring into the engine compartment during starting. Battery switch on. Generator switch on. Fuel pump on. 3 right-hand circuit breakers on. Gun switches off. Now check your fuel pressure.
15.5 pounds.
Okay, then prime the engine.
How much do I give it?
1 stroke for a warm engine, 3 if the engine's cold. Then shut off the fuel pump.
Shut it off?
Yeah, to keep from flooding the engine when you move the mixture control forward. All right. Now, the next thing would be to turn the ignition to both and engage the starter. But we won't do that while the plane's on jacks. After the engine fires, advance the mixture control to auto-rich and the throttle to 1,200 RPM. Then turn the fuel pump back on. If there's no oil pressure within 15 to 30 seconds, stop the engine and investigate the trouble. If the oil pressure's okay, 60 to 80 pounds, warm up the engine at 12 to 1400 RPM until the oil temperature hits 40. And the press-stone temperature at least 85 degrees centigrade. During cold weather, leave the cowl flaps closed until the engine is warmed up. With the propeller switch on manual, run the engine up to 2300 RPM and check the magnetos. A drop of more than 100 RPM on a single magneto indicates faulty ignition. If the magnetos are okay, then switch the propeller back to automatic. Release the parking brake and taxi to the runway. The tail wheel is steerable by the rudder pedals, so don't ride the brakes when you taxi. Now, when you get to the runway, and just before you take off, make a final check of everything. Fuel selector valve on the fuselage tank. Fuselage gauge showing plenty of fuel. Fuel pressure 15 to 16 pounds. Oil temperature above 40 degrees. Oil pressure 60 to 80 pounds. Coolant temperature above 85. Right-hand circuit breakers on. Gun switches off. Battery on. Generator on. Propeller on automatic. Propeller circuit breaker on. Mixture on auto rich. Propeller governor in full forward position. Automatic boost on. Supercharger in low speed. Elevator trim tabs at TO, takeoff position. Rudder trim tab at 1.5 marks to the right. Aileron trim tab neutral. Cowl flaps open, and you're all set to go. Over there on the runway is Lloyd Childs, chief test pilot for Curtiss-Wright. He's going to put that ship through some maneuvers for us. And as he does, I'll try to give you some pointers on handling the P-40 in the air. Okay?
I'm all set.
All right. As the plane starts down the runway, open the throttle with a positive, steady motion. That's it. And steer with the brakes at first. Then use the rudder to steer when you get the tail in the air. Engine torque pulls the left wing down, so keep the wings level by holding the stick to the right. Fly the plane off the ground by lowering the tail just a little at the takeoff.
Then you don't take off in a three-point attitude?
No, because that might put the airplane in a stalled condition, which would be bad at your slow speed right after takeoff. You see, engine failure or a gust of wind when you're stalled so close to the ground could be disastrous. Just as soon as you clear the field, retract the landing gear and retard the throttle and propeller control to normal flying power. Pick up speed as soon as possible and climb at 140 miles an hour. Now, to gain altitude fast, you can climb at full military power for 15 minutes with the Rolls-Royce and 5 minutes with the Allison. These settings are marked with yellow lines on the instrument. The P-40 is normal in all flight characteristics, as you'll see when Lloyd goes through his maneuvers. But I've heard that some new pilots tend to over-control because they're not used to the long nose of the liquid-cooled engine ahead of them. Slight changes in the heading of the airplane with respect to the horizon appear to be more than they would with radial engine airplanes. However, after a few minutes of flying, I'm sure you'll be able to do it smoothly and easily, without fighting the controls. Stalling speed of the P-40 is 82 with the flaps down and 92 with the flaps up. Just before the stall, there's a slight tail buffet to warn the pilot. And the stall, if allowed to continue, throws the plane in a spin that loses 1,000 feet a turn. Now, the P-40 will come out of the spin by itself if the pilot lets go of the controls. But to come out in a hurry, cut the throttle, kick the rudder in the opposite direction to the spin, and shove the control stick forward.
Well, I'm glad to know the plane will straighten out by itself. But if I get in a spin, brother, I want to do something about it. So let's see now. To come out in a hurry, I cut the throttle, kick the rudder hard in the direction opposite to the spin, and shove the control stick forward.
Okay, Lieutenant. That'll take you out of the spins in a hurry. But when you start flying a pursuit airplane, the main thing you've got to learn is the right way to land it. As Lloyd comes in, I'll point out a few things for you to remember when landing a Curtiss P-40. And the first thing to do is to cut your airspeed to less than 175 miles an hour while you're up around 3,500 feet. Get your landing gear down while you still have plenty of altitude. Last-minute operations and maneuvers are apt to upset your good landing technique. Circle the field at approximately 140 miles an hour to get accustomed to the slower airspeed and to familiarize yourself with the field and get set for the landing.
what items do you check off before landing?
They're all listed on this checkoff card. The first thing to do, though, is open the cabin. In fact, most every old-timer will tell you he can judge airspeed better when he feels the breeze in his face. And it's safer to have the cabin open if you hit a ditch and end up on your back. If you ever happen to end up with the airplane on its back and the cabin closed, you can open the kick-out panel in the left-hand side of the sliding hood by means of this red lever near the longeron. There's another emergency exit you can use during flight. Up here in the top of the cabin roof is a red lever. Simply pull this lever, and it'll release the whole cabin. Then you check to make sure the mixture control is on auto rich and the propeller governor control at 2650 automatic setting. It's a good idea to have the propeller set this way for plenty of RPM in case you have to give her the gun and go around again. On the other hand, you should not set it for full 3,000 RPM because it might momentarily over-rev if you open the throttle too fast. Of course, the fuel selector should be on a tank with plenty of gas. The carburetor heat controls full forward, and the gun switches off. And test the hand pump again just to make sure the landing gear is down before you put the landing gear in neutral. While you're still high up, put your flaps about halfway down, make a wide sweep, and glide toward the runway at 115 miles an hour. Trim the elevator tab so the plane will glide hands off at this speed. Line up with the runway while you're still a mile away. This will prevent last-minute maneuvers which sometimes cause ground loops. New pilots have a tendency to undershoot the field. They cut the throttle and come in short. So remember to keep the throttle slightly open when you first come in for a landing. At 500 feet above the ground, put your flaps full down, cut the throttle to 1/2 inch open, and glide in at 115 miles an hour until you're over the runway. And when you're 10 feet off the ground, cut the throttle and level out for the landing. When all the wheels are down in the three-point attitude, apply the brakes fairly hard, but not hard enough to lock the wheels or raise the tail. Remember, most landing accidents happen after the plane is on the runway. So concentrate on rolling straight until the plane comes to a stop.
I can understand that all right.
Well then, Lieutenant, I guess you've got it.
Is that really all there is to flying a Curtiss P-40? It doesn't seem at all complicated now.
Well, there's nothing complicated or difficult about flying this airplane once you understand the things we've carefully gone over. Now, just remember to take it easy. In fact, they tell me a Warhawk, like that one over there, is apt to take off by itself if it's left alone too long.
I get you, sir. I'm practically in the air right now.
On that landing, you look like a veteran.
Oh, thank you, sir. Getting fond of this airplane already.
Okay, Lieutenant. Then you're all set. So long, fella. Lots of luck.
Thanks. Hadn't I better wait for those two P-40s to come in?
No, that's just a couple of the boys waiting to give you a send-off. Go on up and join them. With men like these, flying planes like these, there'll always be a flag like this, waving in the breeze.
This is Chuck Randall. He's training to be a fighter pilot and has about 40 hours in the P-39. Knows the airplane pretty well, too. He's not the hottest pilot in the world, but conscientious. He'll make a good flyer. Here's another of the boys. He has about as much time as Chuck, but a little different approach to his flying. For one thing, he didn't spend much time getting to know his airplane. It finally caught up with him. Coming in one day, his battery went out when the gear was only part way down. It was a funny thing, too, because the battery and generator had just been checked. Well, it meant emergency operation of the gear. He went through all the motions. It didn't feel right at all. It cranked much too easily. It didn't seem to be engaging. Reason? Well, he didn't wait to find out. He had other plans. Sure, it was a safe landing. He didn't have a scratch. But it was a pretty sad-looking airplane. He didn't look too happy himself, and with good reason. In the first place, if he'd had the clutch handle to manual, he could have cranked the gear down without any trouble. In the second place, if he needed help remembering emergency operation, there's a card of instructions on the door. In the third place, if the generator had been on, the battery wouldn't have gone dead in the first place. The moral of that story is, know the airplane you are about to pilot. Now, flying the P-39 is not a lot different from the advanced trainers you've been flying. It has more power, it's faster, and it's very light on the controls. But just as with any new airplane, the more you know about it, the better you'll fly it. Much of the information you need, you'll get from your instructor. Some of it you'll get from talking it over with other men who are in training with you. But the best reference guide is your own experience. It's something you'll always have with you. So keep it up to date. Well, now let's start at the beginning with Chuck and see what he found out. What do you say, Chuck?
Okay, sir. Well, after the tech orders and a thorough check of the cockpit, I was ready to give it a try.
With the tail in the air, I could see where I was going without essing. She taxied very easily with short bursts on the throttle, and I let her coast a lot. Didn't have to use much brake. Getting her in the air was all right. As a matter of fact, it was fun. I'd never flown that much power before, and I was surprised how easily she handled. But I hadn't never landed a tricycle gear job before either, so I guess I was a little uncertain about bringing her in. I could see I was coming in pretty fast, and there wasn't going to be enough runway, so I gunned her to go around again. I knew the fellows were watching, but I figured I could live that down easier than messing up a nice new airplane. Then I brought it in again. Landing instructions said it was just like landing any other airplane, and I took them at their word. I rolled out of the turn at about 140, lowered my flaps, and established a steady glide at about 130. This is how it looks to the slow-motion camera. I came in over the end of the runway at 110, leveled out, and got the airplane in a conventional three-point landing attitude. I set her down on the two main wheels, holding the nose wheel off the ground with a slight back pressure on the stick. I found that I could hold the nose wheel anywhere from a few inches to 2 feet off the ground and still make a good landing. The airplane rolled straight down the runway, and I applied the brakes intermittently to lose speed. We don't roll up the flaps here until we park, since there are no stones to damage them, and there's less chance of hitting the wrong switch.
How was the first flight, Chuck? Have any trouble?
No, sir, it was okay. It was a lot different from what I expected. I guess you can't believe everything you hear.
Depends where you hear it. You can pick up a lot of information from hangar experts, all the free dope you want on any airplane, and they always have it on good authority. Well, to get on with Chuck's story, he was over the first hump, but that was only the beginning. He still had a few things to learn about flying the airplane. And aside from the cockpit, there was a lot he wanted to know about the airplane itself. It's good background. Might come in handy someday.
I was going into my transitional training, which began with 8 engineering missions designed to get me acquainted with the performance of the airplane and the operation of its engine. I was flying a Model N airplane and knew from the tech orders that if necessary, I could take off with 52 inches and 3,000 RPM, which is rated takeoff power. But in training, with the airplane making 8 or 10 takeoffs a day, we're instructed to keep it down to something less. Actually, it's possible to take off with as little as 35 inches. When I had sufficient altitude, I retracted the gear, and when I was up to a few hundred feet, eased back to 35 inches and 2,600. The going was smooth, and it sure felt good to be flying again. But I wasn't ready just yet to sit back and enjoy the scenery. There were a couple of things I had to keep an eye on. The press-stone temperature was under control. Oil temperature was about 70 degrees. Okay. Oil pressure about 70. Fuel pressure, okay. And I had enough airspeed, which is always a good thing to know. They say altitude is like money in the bank, and it's one thing the government has no objection to hoarding. Besides, when you're new to an airplane, it's an especially good idea to have plenty of space underneath you. I was on my way up to 10,000 feet. When I got there, I settled back and tried a few coordination exercises. In rolling into a turn, I found that very little rudder pressure was needed. You want to treat this airplane like a lady. Don't try to be fast or rough if you expect to get along with her. Then I tried a few gentle turns. At first, I had a tendency to skid or slip. The turning radius of this airplane is much greater than what I've been used to. It took me a while to get the proper relationship between the aileron and rudder. But by doing a few more and keeping an eye on the bank and turn indicator, I soon got the idea of how to coordinate properly, and they began to feel pretty smooth. Like all pilots who fly pursuit, it wasn't long before I got to wondering about the speed I could get out of her. So I poured on Nicole to see how she'd react, up to 3,000 RPM and 52 inches. Incidentally, the tech orders say always increase RPM first, then manifold pressure. It's especially important in a high-powered engine like this. If you don't, you'll be building up excess pressure inside the cylinders, and it's liable to detonate and cause serious damage to the engine. With the increased power, temperatures and pressures went up, and I adjusted the shutters. 5 minutes is the maximum time for operation with this power, but I think you can find out what you want to know in less time than that. At least I did. I tried various combinations of mixture, RPM, and manifold pressure at different altitudes to get some idea of how these factors affected power. In my first mission, I tried a few partial stalls with the gear and flaps retracted. I don't quite know what I expected, but I was pleasantly surprised. The airplane stalled very gently and had no tendency to drop a wing. There was plenty of warning before she stalled completely. Later, I carried this a little further and did a complete stall at 10,000 feet with the power partially off. That is about 15 inches. It broke clean at about 100, and to recover, I dropped the nose to let her pick up speed, about 180, before I started to pull her up. As the stall was explained to me, it's all a matter of airflow over the wing's surface. If the airflow is disturbed due to an increased angle of attack, the wing loses its lift and the airplane will stall.
When the airplane approaches a stall, turbulence begins at the roots. And as this section begins to stall, it causes a shuddering. The tail buffets slightly from the effect of this turbulent air. The stall progresses outboard and gradually affects aileron control. Just before the stall is complete, the entire aileron becomes ineffective. In recovery, the ailerons regain control before the wing is completely unstalled. So when you first feel aileron control returning, don't let it fool you. Don't start to pull up until you have sufficient speed.
Later, I tried some partial stalls with the gear and flaps extended. The stall characteristics were pretty much the same as in the clean condition, but with the stall occurring at a lower speed. With the power reduced, I pulled the stick back gently until gradually the stall point was reached. After she began to shudder slightly, at about 95, I eased gently forward on the stick. I let her pick up some speed in a shallow dive, about 140, and eased her back level. Knowing stalls is a pretty good way to get the feel of any airplane, so I practiced until I was sure of it. Then, with the gear still down, I trimmed the airplane for an indicated airspeed of 150 and tried some gliding turns for practice and landing approaches. I figured it'd be a good idea to try them first at a safe altitude where there were no traffic problems, and I could concentrate on getting the knack of a properly coordinated gliding turn. I knew that speed was important, and I didn't let it drop below 130. At first, I'd go beyond a medium bank. A steeper bank is all right, but it's easy to skid, and I wanted to be darn sure I didn't pull her in too tight. It wasn't long before I was ready to hang one on the beginning of a landing. I kept some power on and didn't cut the gun until after the turn. I could spot my landings pretty well now. These I'd had at first were cleared up after I'd made a few more. Another day, I gave some attention to climbing. With normal climbing power, 2,639 inches, she indicated 160, which is the best climbing speed. Compared to the trainers I'd flown before, this baby really climbed. At 12,000 feet, I put her in a dive. I'd tried a few before, and this time I wanted to get up to 400. I hadn't trimmed for the dive, and I found that I needed left rudder and some forward stick pressure to follow a straight flight path. At about 7,000 feet, I started to pull out very gradually. It didn't matter so much how fast I was traveling, just so I took it easy in the pull-out. In a dive, the greater the speed, the more gradual the pull-out has to be. I still had a lot to learn about the airplane, and flying tight turns was a good way to do it. It helps to develop the feeling for the airplane, which is so necessary for combat flying. It's important to be in full control at all times, and so it meant working up to them gradually. As I went along, I reefed them in tighter, and pretty soon was pulling them in almost to the stall point. I was making the turns as tight as I could without stalling out. There was a definite change in the feel of the controls just preceding the stalling condition. I could feel a buffeting on the tail, and the whole airplane shuddered. I got so I could recognize it and was able to prevent a stall by relaxing back pressure. Occasionally, I'd let her stall some, but it was easy enough to recover. The airplane unstalled quickly, and full control returned immediately. The speed didn't matter so much as the tightness of turn. The tighter the turn, the higher the speed at which I stalled out. I practiced tight turns on a number of missions and got to be pretty sure of myself, and probably a little careless. Because during one, I guess I must have pulled her in a little too tight. The airplane stalled, and I didn't relax back pressure quick enough, and I spun out of the inside of the turn. It caught me unawares, and it must have been a couple of turns before I started to recover. She responded promptly. I decided to check up on spins, and this is what my instructor had to say.
In this airplane, a spin is an irregular gyration going first slow and then fast in an oscillatory pattern. The first move, when you're aware you're in a spin, is to close the throttle and go into low RPM. As soon as the direction of rotation is established, bring the stick full back, apply full rudder with the spin, and hold until ready to recover. When the airplane comes to the slow part of its gyration, apply hard opposite rudder. A moment later, move the stick full forward and apply ailerons against the spin. As soon as the rotation stops, usually about 3/4 of a turn, it'll begin to recover in a steep dive. Neutralize all controls and wait until the airplane picks up speed and feels normal. Then gradually start to pull up, and recovery is completed. In the P-39, as in most airplanes, a spin is easily and quickly recovered from, if not permitted to progress too far.
I was familiar with the feel of the basic maneuvers and could coordinate each of them pretty well. Next, it was a matter of combining them, and the Lazy 8 was a good way to do it. It's a valuable maneuver for developing coordination, since it involves motion about all three axes of the airplane at the same time and through a wide range of speeds. I started them from cruising, pulling up in a bank not more than 70 degrees at the steepest point, with a minimum airspeed of 160 at the top of the arc and not exceeding 300 at the center of the 8. When I could do a good job of these, I felt I was well on my way to mastering the airplane. Next came the two-plane element, flying with my instructor. We talked it over first on the ground and checked on signals. We took off individually and got into formation in a gentle turn. In loose formation, we climbed to a safe altitude. At 10,000 feet, I trimmed out the ship and pulled up into formation on signal. Keeping it fairly loose, we tried some gentle turns. I was flying on the inside and found that at first I had a tendency to over-control. But brushing up on the old fundamentals of position, distance, and smooth throttle coordination, it wasn't long before I could do a fairly decent job of following around in a turn. Actually, with the additional power and increased speed range of the airplane, I found it was easier to fly good formation in the P-39 than in the training airplanes I'd flown before. Then we tried some climbs. It was good practice for coordinating my speed and throttle settings with the leaders. And then some dives. Pretty gentle at first, and then steeper. I was becoming accustomed to flying formation at higher speeds and in sharper maneuvers. With several two-plane missions behind me, I felt pretty much at home in formation. I hadn't done much in the way of acrobatics in the airplane and felt about ready for it. Double-checking my shoulder harness lock, I tried some rolls. Starting at cruising, it rolled very easily and had a good response to the ailerons. The stick pressures generally were much lighter than I'd been accustomed to, and she responded quickly and smoothly. Although a pretty easy maneuver, it sure built up my confidence. Then came loops.
During this maneuver, the airplane flies through two speed extremes, high at the beginning and end, and low at the top. Trimmed for cruising, I applied left rudder as I pulled up. As the speed decreased, I relaxed rudder pressure. As the airplane continued up, I applied right rudder. On the downward arc, as the speed increased beyond cruising, I relaxed right and gradually applied left rudder. Straight back on the stick fairly hard so as to maintain sufficient speed to carry me through at the top. Nearing the inverted position, I relaxed back pressure slightly and stretched my neck backward as far as possible to see the horizon when it appeared. I could use it as a reference in keeping my wings level. Then on down and around. After more acrobatic practice, I felt I could handle the airplane in all attitudes and was confident in trying my hand at more advanced maneuvers. Something my instructor said helped.
With proper instruction, you should feel no apprehension about attempting almost any maneuver. And you'll find that very often fear of the unknown is removed by deliberately doing what you're afraid will happen.
All my training thus far had pointed toward one thing, and now I was ready for it. Gunnery. These planes are built around their armament and are equipped to deliver a lot of firepower. First, I tried my hand at ground targets. With fixed guns aimed to fire along the axis of the airplane, I knew the projectile would strike the target only if I were flying a straight, true course. It meant having the ball in the center. With the ship in a skid, there was a horizontal component, and I hit to one side of the target. And the speed I was traveling at was important, too. Below the recommended speed, the airplane was inclined above the flight path. At higher speeds, it was inclined below the flight path, introducing a vertical component. I started at 2,000 or 3,000 feet in a steep dive and flattened out to make an approach at 15 to 25 degrees to the horizon. I found I could come down pretty close and still not have to pull out steeply or abruptly. Next came water targets, and here I had to be even more careful in my pullouts. I didn't hit very much at first, but I was told not to be too concerned. Accurate judgment of speed and timing in pullouts can only be attained with many practice runs. Since this airplane has proved an effective weapon for attacking ground objectives, my training included low-altitude flying and simulated strafing. Then came deflection gunnery practice on aerial targets, making dry passes at another ship. I started with a small amount of deflection, turning to keep lead on the target. Gradually, I increased the speed and narrowed the angle. And it soon became evident that my practice in tight turns was time well spent. Just lately, I've been practicing with live ammunition on a towed sleeve, which brings me pretty well up to date. As a matter of fact, I'm due for a mission right now. So long, fellas. See you around.
Thanks, Chuck. You men going into training in this airplane will probably cover much the same ground, perhaps in much the same way. You'll be flying an airplane which is fast and powerful. It is sensitive to the controls and quick to respond. Know thoroughly its characteristics, and when you join the men now in combat, your job will be easier, and like theirs, well done. For in the various war theaters, the record shows that when American fighting men in fighting airplanes set out for an enemy objective, the report is sure to be mission accomplished.
equal importance to your task of successfully carrying out your missions in the theater of operations is the information to be gained from the journey out and back. To this end, fighter pilots and bombardment crews must be on the alert when not engaged with the enemy for information, for intelligence.
Gentlemen, you'll follow me on this map. Once you get into enemy territory, there's danger of interception all along this line, especially over Mori, which is here, about 60 miles out, and Choba, here, about 110 miles from our base. The 86th Bombardment Group has the mission of flying direct to Yamura at 20,000 feet and bombing various objectives there. They will assemble over Chora at 5,000 feet at 0430 hour tomorrow morning. This group, with the 17th Fighter Group, has the mission of escorting and protecting the bombardment group for the first 200 miles. And on the return trip, it will execute certain reconnaissance missions. When you get to the fork of the Dungo River, here, you are at the end of your escort mission. Squadron commanders will then turn back with their squadrons in formation. Major White will explain the mission to you in detail.
On the return trip, we are ordered to get all information possible concerning the results of our bombing last night of the railroad junction and oil dump at Keita. This city is ringed with anti-aircraft defenses, and from previous experience, we judge it to have an excellent anti-aircraft warning service. You can see from this map that the oil dump is 1.5 miles southeast of the main railroad depot. It is adjacent to a railroad line, so that though you fail to locate the depot, you should be able to spot the oil dump. Also, if the mission of last night was at all successful, there should be fires still burning with heavy black smoke. Information is also requested by headquarters on developments in a wood 5 miles west of Matora. This photograph, taken 5 days ago, is an exact duplicate of all other photographs taken of the wood in the past. Since then, however, we have had reports of new roads leading into the wood. This suggests enemy activity we should know about. At the towns of Hyugi and Korea, here, near the Grom Canal, we have reports of activities of clearing woods and of building spur track, and it's requested that we reconnoiter these positions, giving particular attention to the possibility that new aerodromes are being established there. Intelligence believes this activity may be guarded by anti-aircraft, so be cautious of your approach. As you leave, you'll pick up a map of the Atsui area and also aerial photographs of Mori, Yamura, Korea, and Keita. I think that's all, sir.
This group will take off at 0440 hour, climb to 30,000 feet.
As I said, our protective mission is, of course, to prevent enemy aircraft from interfering with the bombing mission. Now, you will not leave formation to engage enemy aircraft unless attack by that aircraft seems probable. And you will, in that event, act only on my signal. We have discussed the reconnaissance objectives. At the Dungo River, we will all turn back. Follow me as I turn. We will gradually descend to a point 5 miles short of Keita. At that time, Lieutenant Duffel here, on my signal of a wing dip in his direction, will leave the formation to execute the Keita mission. The rest of us will slow down to 200 miles airspeed. And on my signal of a wing rock, flights A and B will separate from flights C and D and fly to the right of the Keita area, while the other flights fly to the left, all converging on the original course about 5 miles west of Keita. Any questions? That's all, gentlemen. We take off in exactly 10 minutes.
At the initial point, fighter escort and bombers meet at dawn and climb to their base altitude. Darkness imposes a considerable handicap on air reconnaissance. Also, observations from aircraft operating in formation have their maneuverability restricted. Here, the protective mission comes first, and the collecting of enemy information is incidental to the main mission. Requirements of keeping formation may seriously interfere with accurate visual reconnaissance. At the fork of the River Dungo, the escort mission is over. The 181st Squadron Operations Officer was designated at the group meeting as group commander for the escort mission. The squadrons observe his prearranged signal and head back for their individual missions. The bombers continue on. The commander checks the attendance at this point so that he may report the complete success of the escort mission. The 181st Squadron has already started to lose altitude from 20,000 feet to the 10,000 feet it must attain 5 miles short of Quetta. The airplanes are gaining speed slightly as they descend toward their required altitude, and this maneuver also is affected by a prearranged signal. By plan made at the squadron meeting before takeoff, it was decided that the squadron, except for Lieutenant Duffel, would divide into two sections, one going to the right and the other to the left of Quetta, and flying at 10,000 feet. The purpose of this maneuver is to draw enemy fire and attention away from Lieutenant Duffel, and at the same time remain at such an altitude as to operate with maximum safety. Lieutenant Duffel, observing this signal, leaves the formation to perform his solo mission. He has been ordered to reconnoiter the effect of the bombing of the oil tanks and railroad junction at Quetta, and to fly fast and low on an eccentric path to offer the least target opportunity for possible hostile fire. Although his vision is limited because of his great speed, Lieutenant Duffel can nevertheless get a half a dozen impressions from his rapid flight over the objective. He flies low and fast for 2 or 3 miles past his objective, so he'll not be exposed to accurate anti-aircraft fire. He then rejoins his squadron. On its flight from Quetta to Korea, a distance of 30 miles, the squadron climbs to a safer altitude of 20,000 feet. The commander signals his squadron to divide, and the squadron follows as he dives toward the objective at Korea. Intelligence suspects the woods on the northeast edge of the field at Korea of being an enemy airdrome in the making. Lieutenant Duffel has already made notes of his first mission at Quetta. He now records everything he saw at Korea and has made a report of the time and altitude of each reconnaissance. Notes are taken of anything seen which was not apparent on the aerial photograph examined before the mission. Nothing is left to the memory. The 182nd Squadron has been given the mission of investigating Mitora for new developments. To the experienced intelligence officer, any change in the theater of operations is always foreshadowed by changes in ground installations. The squadron has descended from 20,000 feet above the Dungo River to 15,000 feet as it approaches Matora in preparation for the mission. The squadron commander signals one pilot to accompany him. They dive to reconnoiter the Matora woods. One flies to the left of the woods and the other to the right. This plan enhances the opportunity for observation, presents an element of surprise and confusion to enemy ground troops, and results in less effective fire from automatic weapons. In this situation, the fighter airplane will depend upon speed and close-to-the-ground flight as protection against enemy fire. It's for this reason that these two pilots fly 2 or 3 miles past the target before they start their ascent. They recognize the danger of anti-aircraft protection through camouflage units they've been reconnoitering, whereas 2 miles past these positions, it's less likely that there will be anti-aircraft guns. As he makes notes on the mission at Matora, this pilot looks at the map of the woods to aid his recollection of any changes he has seen. And now the fighter squadrons have completed both their escort and their intelligence missions. The enemy will attempt to limit our air reconnaissance and observation by all means at his disposal. Therefore, it becomes essential at times to use combat types of airplanes for this kind of work because of their great speed and defensive armament. Their flying missions completed, the pilots must turn in reports to squadron headquarters as soon as possible.
Well, gentlemen, we're all back. Was that machine gun fire at Korea at the southeast end of the field?
Yes, sir.
Ellis, what did you men see in the edge of those woods, northeast of the field at Korea?
Well, Captain, I didn't have a lot of time. I saw a shack on the west end of the woods. There were several trucks and tractors scattered along the edge of the wood. And at the northeast end of the wood, there's a road that doesn't show up on our aerial photograph.
What else did you see, gentlemen? Can you add to this?
I saw pretty much the same thing, Captain. And there really is a shack or building at the west end of the woods. It looks like yellow unweathered lumber.
I didn't see any building, but I did see a road which does not appear in the aerial photograph on the northeast side of the field.
Anything else?
Yes, sir. I saw both the unweathered wood building and the new road. There were a lot of trucks in that wood, too.
What about you officers who flew on the south end of the field?
That's all I saw, Captain. Quite a few tents, but no other change.
How about that report, Lieutenant Duffel? Are you ready?
Yes, sir, Major. It's ready.
Colonel Harrington? This is Major Lamb, 181st. Yes, sir. The gist of the report you desire is here in paragraph 8. I'll read from Lieutenant Duffel's report. At Queda, 0559 hour, I saw 5 or 6 enormous oil tanks burning and giving off very heavy smoke, and saw some dark red flame at 2 of the tanks. At the railroad junction, 1.5 miles southwest of the oil tanks, I saw a large group of laborers. I could not see what the damage was they were working on. Over Korea, 0610 hour, in the edge of wood northeast of field, I saw a new wood building at the northeast end, several tractors and trucks in the wood, and a road at the southwest end, which does not appear on our aerial photograph, which is annexed here too. Light 50 caliber anti-aircraft machine gun fire at western end of field at Korea. Yes, sir. I'll send a formal report immediately.
182nd reporting. Yes, sir. Armored force, at least some of it heavy tanks.
We didn't see a thing, which doesn't show up in the aerial photograph of this area.
3 heavy tanks in the southeast edge of the wood.
Looks to me like this trip has given G2 something to think about.
Off we go into the wild blue yonder, climbing high into the sun. Here they come, zooming to meet our thunder. At the boy, give us a gun, give us a gun. Now down we dive, stopping our plane from under. Off with one terrible roar. We live in fame, or go down in flames. Boys, nothing will stop the Army Air Corps.
Good morning, Captain.
Hello, fellas. I understand you're ready to be checked out on the P-39. I see you've been reading over your pre-flight dope. That's the right idea. It's very important to have the technical orders covering the operation and first echelon maintenance well in mind before you take the plane off the ground for the first time. It should be thoroughly covered.
Line. Some models have a 20-millimeter cannon and others a 37-millimeter. In addition, there are two synchronized 50-caliber guns in the nose and two 30-caliber guns in each wing panel. You have enough armament here to take care of yourself and make it uncomfortable for the enemy as well. The guns are charged from the cabin and are fired electrically. There is a gun selection panel in the cockpit where you can switch on any or all of the guns. On the stick, there's a trigger for the 30s and 50s and a separate button for the cannon.